Bíshin Echtri na Gaeltach, Little Pieces of Highland History, A Lost Son of the Mackays, a Highlander on the Titanic. In the early hours of Monday the 15th of April 1912, the unsinkable RMS Titanic sank beneath the waves, taking 1,503 men, women and children to their deaths. This is the story of one of them, a young man from the Highlands of Scotland. George William Mackay was born in the far north of Scotland, in Clechbay, in the parish of Tongue in Sutherland, a stunning landscape of mountains, lochs and sandy bays. A land of ancient ruins and clan battles. Viking longships and Spanish galleons sailed these waters. A French warship carrying gold for Bonnie Prince Charlie was forced ashore here. No support for the prince in these parts. This was Clan Mackay country, and the Mackays were the king's men. George was born on the 5th of January 1892 in a large, Gaelic-speaking crofting family. His home was a small croft house overlooking Torresdale Bay. He went to Skerra public school until he was 14 years old. George's life after leaving school is a mystery. By 1911, he was working in Queensgate, Kensington, London, as a 19-year-old footman in the household of barrister Edward Montefiore Michels. Meanwhile, in Rochester, New York, on the other side of the world, two of George's sisters, Georgina and Christina, had already started new lives. George, enticed by exciting accounts of opportunities to be had, decided the following year to join them. 1912 was the year of the national coal strike, and the shortage of coal meant that shipping companies had to revise schedules. The maiden voyage of Titanic was very important to the White Star Line. Coal was transferred to her from other ships to allow her to sail. Passengers who'd intended to travel later, including George, were offered earlier passage on Titanic. Who would turn down such a fantastic opportunity? George accepted, and back home in Scotland, George's mother had a premonition of an impending family disaster. Titanic set sail from Southampton on Wednesday, 10th of April, a bright sunny day. The ship was carrying people of all classes. Millionaires such as Benjamin Guggenheim occupied magnificent staterooms on the upper decks, while third-class single passengers such as George had shared cabins down in the bowels of the ship. George would spend his time during those first 4 days mingling with other third-class passengers and enjoying the meals served in pleasant surroundings. Sunday, 14th of April, the last day, dawned, and the weather had turned cold. A boat drill should have taken place after breakfast, but was not ordered. Perhaps it might have shown the discrepancy between the capacity of the lifeboats and the numbers of passengers. So the hours ticked peacefully by, and the day came to a close. Darkness fell. There was no moon, and the sky was full of stars. It was clear, and the sea flat calm. In the Marconi wireless room on Titanic, several messages were received, warning of icebergs in the vicinity. It all began at 20 minutes to midnight. 70-year-old survivor John B. Thayer Jr. wrote in a letter to his father, "There was only a slight shock and bumping, then all was still." Men like George in third-class cabins got out of bed to investigate and stepped into freezing cold water. The sea was rising up through the ship and the bow was going down. The Goodwin family, like other third-class families much further back in the stern of the ship, were unaware of the problem until later, when the angle of the ship began changing. Titanic was a warren below decks, and nobody came to explain to third-class passengers what was happening or what they should do. Meanwhile, far above them, distress messages began to be sent out, lifeboats launched and flares fired. 703 of the 2,206 men, women and children on board Titanic made it into the lifeboats. The rest, as John B. Thayer later described the scene, a mass of hopeless dazed humanity, stood huddled together on the deck, gradually being forced back, step by step, as the water crept up towards them. Eventually, at 2:20 in the morning, the stern rose up out of the water, and Titanic plunged into the depths of the Atlantic, taking over 1,500 souls to their deaths. Help was on the way. RMS Carpathia steamed at top speed, arriving less than 2 hours later. The crew rescued the survivors from the lifeboats and took them on to New York. They arrived 3 days later, on the evening of the 18th of April. A crowd of 30,000 concerned relatives and friends were waiting. Perhaps George's sisters, Georgina and Christina, were amongst the crowds, full of hope. Meanwhile, back at the site of the tragedy, C.S. Mackay Bennett was recovering bodies, as instructed by the White Star Line. It carried 205 bodies to Halifax, Nova Scotia. 118 people were buried at sea, while over 1,100 passengers and crew were never accounted for. George was one of these. In Rochester, New York, George's sisters anxiously awaited news. They sent a telegram to the White Star office inquiring about him, only to be told that he was not a passenger on Titanic. They confirmed with his former employer in England that he was on board and sent a second telegram, only to be told again that George was not on the ship. Eventually, a telegram arrived from the White Star office informing them that he had in fact been on board and was amongst the missing. A cruel twist to a sad story. Today, in Skerra churchyard, close to George's home, there stands a memorial stone. It reads, "Erected in loving memory of George William Mackay, Cleich, son of William and Christina Mackay, who was lost in the Titanic disaster 15th of April 1912, aged 20 years. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Matthew 5:8. Put up by his friends in London. A poignant memorial to a lost son of the Mackays. If you are visiting the north of Scotland, perhaps doing the North Coast 500 route, or live close by, why not pay a visit to George's memorial? Take a sprig of heather for him. Spend a few minutes there, and think about this young Highlander setting out into the world to find a new life, following in the footsteps of thousands of Highlanders who had gone before him, only to become an unwitting player in a famous tragedy.